Asia is in the grip of extreme weather events. Heat stroke warnings are in place in Japan, while South Korea is coping with flooding brought on by heavy rainfall. Here's more on a region that's seeing firsthand the impact of climate change.
With ferocious force, Typhoon Talim slams into China's southern port city of Zhangjiang. Authorities earlier issued flood warnings and a stay-at-home order. They knew what to expect. It's the fourth typhoon to hit the city this year, with winds up to 135 kilometers per hour. Along China's eastern coast, the storm's outer belt dumped rain for hours. Flash floods trapped residents in their homes in Fujian and stranded vehicles in Yangzhou City. South Korea is still digging out from landslides and floods triggered by days of torrential rain. At least 41 people have died across the country, including several who drowned in a flooded highway underpass in the city of Cheongju. President Yoon Suk-yeol has vowed that the country will overhaul its preparation for extreme weather linked to climate change. In India's capital, Delhi, heavy monsoons have caused the Yamuna River to breach its banks to the highest point in 45 years. Thousands of people have been evacuated to makeshift relief camps, with limited access to clean water or shelter from the rain. Elsewhere in Asia's northern hemisphere, extreme heat is the danger this summer. Much of Japan is suffering under scorching temperatures, up to 37 degrees Celsius in Tokyo. And China's western Xinjiang region has set a new record in the famous Flaming Mountains, as hot as 52 degrees Celsius during daylight hours. Many climate scientists warn that these extremes are signs of what's to come, with no end in sight to global warming.
And joining me now for more is Earth System scientist Raghu Murtugudde. He's an emeritus professor at the University of Maryland and faculty at the Indian Institute of Technology in Mumbai. Professor Murtugudde, extreme heat in Japan, rainfall, flooding in South Korea and India, now a typhoon across China and Vietnam. Are all these extreme weather events connected?
Yes, they are actually. It's funny, this year, the entire northern hemisphere has been warm. June is now the warmest month on record. But the funny thing is, if you look at the patterns of warming, the entire Atlantic Ocean from the edge of Antarctica into the Arctic is very warm. And the eastern half of it towards the coast of Europe is some of the record warmth in the Atlantic Ocean. Same thing is happening in the Indian Ocean, where the ocean is warm from the Southern Ocean all the way into Northern Indian Ocean, with the Arabian Sea being record warm as well. So this pushes the so-called rain band or the intertropical convergence zone northward, and combined with the Arctic warmth, this begins to funnel weather systems across the globe. So they are all connected right now.
This record warming, how is it linked to climate change?
This is a deadly combination, actually. If you look at the warming since about 1990, the warming over land has been really, really the fastest, other than the Arctic, extending from Middle East, Western Eurasia into the Mediterranean. And the other combination is that for 3 years, we had a La Nina over the tropical Pacific. If you remember, around Galapagos, waters are normally cold. And this is when the ocean is taking up heat. It's soaking up heat like a sponge from the atmosphere. When a La Nina comes, those temperatures are colder than normal because the winds are stronger. It's pulling up cold water from deeper in the ocean. So lots of heat has accumulated in the tropical Pacific for 3 years, 2021, 22. And when an El Nino comes, that heat is going to be belched out. We typically call El Nino mini global warming. So now we are combining the global warming with the El Nino related mini global warming. The other unusual thing this year is that the wildfires have burned 3 times average area by now, and it has emitted almost 3 times as much carbon this year, which is also adding to the warmth this year. So it's just about the worst combination we could imagine.
I mean, your explanations actually sound very apocalyptic if one just focuses on that. And therefore, I need to ask you how nations in Asia, for example, prepare for the impact of climate change.
So this is basically comes down to having very good early warning systems so that 1 to 3 days, 3 to 10 days, week 2 to 4, we need to have forecasts based on which disaster management, for heat waves, you have cooling centers, shelters, access to hospitals, hydration centers. These are all need to be prepared, but you need to have a very good sense of the vulnerability. Even in a city like Mumbai or Beijing, not every neighborhood is affected the same way. So you need to know where are the most vulnerable people who work outside, old people who don't have cars, who have to travel by public transportation, kids who have to play outside during school days, etc. So we need to have a very good map of where the heat wave is going to be, who are the most vulnerable people, and what assistance we can give them to deal with the heat wave as it's happening and recover if they are affected and prepare beforehand based on the early warnings. Because these if hazards are really coming from far. Arabian Sea is warming, which is pumping a lot of heat and humidity into India, especially northwest India. You cannot control the Arabian Sea. So you have to control what happens in urban centers by, increasing your vegetation cover over the longer period. But on a shorter period, you provide free public transportation and other access to, remedial measures.
How do you assess the level of preparedness from governments across Asia? And the reason I refer to this bigger band of Asia is because we're talking about a mix of countries at various stages of economic development. You're talking about Japan, and at the same time, you're also talking about Bangladesh and India. Do you find that when it comes to this preparedness, it's going to be the richer nations that will be better prepared than the poorer ones?
It's kind of a mixed bag because India has invested hundreds of millions since 2009 to improve their early warning systems, and they have done well not only for heat waves but also cyclones, for example. The number of deaths have dropped dramatically, but the property loss is always there. And India also shares its early warnings with the neighboring countries, at least the friendly ones. Unfortunately, there is geopolitics involved there, but the Indian Ocean Rim countries get early warnings from India as well. The other thing we have to note is that the number of deaths in the mid-latitudes for Europe and Japan tends to be much higher than for the tropical countries. To some extent, we have adapted to heat over tropical countries, so it's not so unusual in that sense, whereas the number of deaths tend to be 10 times higher when you go to mid-latitudes. So rich countries can protect themselves better, but older people especially are much more vulnerable.
We'll leave it there for the time being, but thanks so much for joining us today, Professor Raghu Murtugudde.
Thank you.